Earl Thomas has given us the perfect segue into the nitty gritty. This is what I was waiting to get into because I know you have a lot to say about this. Earl says, do you think PBC purposely waited all these years for Spence to get more experience because they feared Spence wasn't ready for Terence Crawford?
100% yes. 100%. So let's not label PBC. Let's identify, because again, I'm allowed to do that.
Yeah. Specifics.
Al Heyman runs PBC. Errol Spence Jr. has a trainer, Derek James. Great trainer, elite trainer.
Creme de la creme.
Yes, elite. He has handlers, he has people that support him, that give him advice, not just Al Heyman. It's very clear. All of them are concerned about him fighting Terence Bud Crawford. All of them. There's not one person affiliated with Errol Spence Jr. who is not concerned about whether he can get past Terence Bud Crawford. So, this man down strap season, I'm here taking all the belts. When you get to 147, just get a belt.
I'm the big fish.
Yes, I'm the big fish. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. I'm going to get all the belts, and then I'm going to get the last one. Well, wasn't Errol Spence Jr. the one who went on social media? I've never seen this happen before in my lifetime. Went on social media and told the fans, stop talking about the fight.
Say, go brush your teeth and play with your kids. Stop talking about the fight.
He told fight fans to stop talking about him versus Terence Bud Crawford. Think about that as a fight fan. Just think about that. He told him to stop talking about it. So if you want people to stop talking about it, that means you don't want there to be an organic build-up to a pay-per-view clash.
For Undisputed.
Because how do you get sales? How do you get hype? How do you get buzz? By people talking about the fight. So, no, PBC didn't purposely wait. Errol Spence Jr. himself is reluctant to fight Terence Bud Crawford. Now, I went on record last year and I said this fight is going to be announced in 2022.
I've seen you say it many times.
I said it last year. It's going to be announced. That's the word I used, announced. And that's the word I will continue to use. So when I saw my friend Brendan, True School Sports, offer breaking news, and it was breaking news, and he said, this fight is happening. I believe that's your wording. You said
it's happening. Yeah, it's happening.
And you said it about how many weeks ago was that?
Well, we reported the original report about Darren Fio. Remember Darren Fio? And then Darren Fio piggybacked off of my initial report. He said that, the guarantee was holding the fight up. That was 13 days after my first report. And then I got word through sources that the fight is happening. And now you're starting to see people in boxing saying the same thing. The fight is happening. It's going to get announced. So maybe, fingers crossed, maybe even tonight. Who knows? Yeah. But
the fight's going to get announced. Great. Congratulations. I'm happy I have a home in Las Vegas because I don't want to be one of the pissed off people that make travel arrangements and find out that the fight gets postponed or something else. I'll already be in Las Vegas and Nevada. So if the fight actually happens, great. I will be at the fight. If it doesn't, I'm not going to say much. I mean, it's one of these things where I think people need to use their own brains. I mean, I'm not trying to sway people to think one way or the other. I'm trying to get people to appreciate boxing, my favorite sport, respect the competitive spirit, of the athletes, and learn how to decipher and see the difference between boxers who really want to push themselves, really want to fight the best, no excuses. We have several of them right now. We've discussed them earlier. Alexander Usyk, Terence Crawford, Vasily Lomachenko, guys who want to fight the best and want to prove that they're the best. Errol Spence Jr., I question whether he wants to prove that he's the best. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to harp on it. The fight's going to get announced, and if Errol Spence Jr. follows through and gets in the ring with Terence Crawford, he's going to lose the fight. People can debate it all they want. You can slice it up however you want to. Terence Crawford is a better boxer than Errol Spence Jr. People should already know that right now. I don't care how loyal of a fan you are to Errol Spence Jr. He's not as good as Terence Crawford, and he'll lose.
Yeah, and I would echo those sentiments because I've been saying that for a long time. A lot like my man right here, Jerry, he said to you, Charles, he says, think about this. Crawford has said many times he does not care about fighting Spence and does not even want to talk about it. Several times he said that. Did you miss that? I
didn't miss it at all. That's what someone in the negotiating place has to do. So Errol Spence Jr. is aligned with Al Haymon and PBC. He doesn't have to negotiate the fight. Why would Terence Crawford go around saying he desperately needs this fight and give leverage to the people that he's negotiating with?
Put himself in a weaker position.
So he needs to tell the public that he doesn't need the fights, and therefore he has leverage to get as much money as possible. The man needs to get paid for his work. So why would you go around and let people know, oh, I really need this fight? So if you really need the fight, then maybe you'll take $3 million instead of $10 million. So if you say you don't need the fight, then maybe you'll be fortunate like a Caleb Plant, who is nowhere near as good as Terence Crawford, or a George Kambosos, who is nowhere near as good as Terence Crawford. And Terence Crawford will get the $10 million because maybe Errol Spence Jr. and his fans will say he needs the fight because he's supposedly on this mission to get undisputed.
Yeah.
Wasn't he getting belts after belts after belts?
He was cleaning up the side of the street.
So we're at 3 now. Doesn't Errol Spence Jr. need the 4th belt like Alvarez needed the 4th belt? Is that the case or not the case? So Terence Crawford's people aren't promoting this fight. They're not putting it on. They're not producing it. They're not selecting the network. This is being done by Al Haymon and PBC. So how much does Errol Spence Jr. need to become undisputed? Something Terence Crawford has already done.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just playing catch up, at this point. Errol hasn't even become the lineal champion in one weight class. Terence been the lineal champion in 2 weight classes. And if he fights Errol and beats him, he'll be the lineal champion in 3 weight classes.
I mean, this is too like plain and simple. Like either, you want the fight or you don't. So Al Haymon, PBC is in control of this ship. They have Showtime assisting, backing, and trying to broadcast the fight on pay-per-view. Just make the fight and cut the BS. Like all this, you've already said Terence Crawford hasn't fought anybody and he only fights C-level opponents, blah, 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 blah. You already said that Terence Crawford costs top-ranked money and Bob Arum, 90 years old and all, supposedly can get mansions in Beverly Hills off the money he lost. Blah, 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 blah. You say all these different things, just make the fight. And if Errol Spence Jr. is better than Terence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr. will become undisputed welterweight champion of the world. No one's going to complain. Nobody's going to cry. And the fact that Terence Crawford has never even been involved in a controversial decision, I'll be the first to say it. If Errol Spence Jr. makes it close, listen to my words, read my lips. If he makes it close, give Errol the belts.
That's how much conviction Charles has in the fight. Okay.